Leland Sklar.
Guilty as charged. It's been an amazing adventure. I literally pinch myself every day that I can't believe I've been so lucky to have the career I've had.
Yeah.
And the diversity of it is what's kept me excited about what I do. There's times when I've been jealous of like a guy in a band, and all he's ever had to play is that band. I mean, when I would look at the Stones and you think of Bill Wyman, all he ever had to learn Stones tunes, and you know the likes of that, or Flea just really only has to know Chili Peppers.
Yeah.
For me, it's like every day I have to join a new band when I go to work. It makes you crazy, but it also keeps you very alive. It's a very convoluted story. I was in a band in the late 60s called Wolfgang. Our drummer was a drummer named Bugs Pemberton, who was in Jackie Lomax and the Undertakers in England, who were really kind of rivals to the Beatles back in that day. They were really popular. Jackie Lomax was like a heartthrob, and Bugs was like, he could have been a male model. He was just this beautiful drummer, physically, and a great drummer. Well, he had a very close friend named John Fishbeck. John Fishbeck owned a studio in Los Angeles called Crystal Recorders, and he did all of Stevie Wonder's early records there. And John Fishbeck, when he was growing up, had a friend, James Taylor. So James was in town. John brought James to our rehearsal, a Wolfgang rehearsal, to come visit Bugs over there. And James played us some of his songs like Country Road, and we actually ended up doing we were a hard rock band though. We had nothing to do with the sensitive folk rock thing. We were almost kind of like Allman Brothers, ZZ Top, Zeppelin. I mean, the first gig we ever played was opening for Zeppelin at Winterland.
Wow.
So we ended up doing, I think, a Country Road and maybe one other tune of his. We liked him, but shortly after that is when James' Fire and Rain was released. He had already cut his Apple album in England, and it was kind of a convoluted little thing. But Peter Asher was managing and producing him, and Peter contacted me and said that James had met you and really liked the way you played, and we have a gig at the Troubadour, and would you be interested in playing it? And at that point, I had just left Wolfgang. We had just kind of a parting of the ways. It was like we were all still in college. Things were just not going anywhere. So I said, great. And when we played the gig, and that was it. I figured that was one shot, and then I'm back at school. Well, then Fire and Rain came out, and suddenly James is on the cover of Time magazine. He's like the end all. The music just took a quantum shift and turned into the singer-songwriter movement. Well, once again, you know, it's when there's this variety of people that I've been blessed to work with, it runs the whole gamut. I mean, I love working with Phil Collins. We always had such a great time in the studio. I loved working with James Taylor and Jackson Browne, Hall & Oates. I loved working with those guys when we did their early records. But there's so many. I mean, Toto was so much fun to work with those guys, and I'm working on their new album.
Yeah.
Working with Lukather on his records. But there's so many. I mean, when I walk in, sometimes I did an album called Butterfly with Barbra Streisand, and we did it live vocals, everything. It's like direct to 2-track. So full orchestra, background singers, everybody was there. And you put your headphones on and you listen to this music and you just go, holy crap, this is great. Yeah. And you'll go into the control room and listen back, and it's done.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's like every time you walk in, it's a new adventure, and they're all valid. There's been very few. I always refer to the pant loads, you know, people that are just sickening. That's the most nebulous part of the equation. I mean, you walk into a studio, and the minute each musician starts to play, you can tell if they can play or not. You watch the engineer pulling up sounds, and the second engineer working with them. You can tell immediately that. I've worked with some producers for 40 years. I still don't have a clue if they have any idea what's going on, because it's a weird seat. Yeah. But certainly Peter Asher was a wonderful producer to work with. I used to love working with David Anderle. We did like all of the Christopherson, Rita Coolidge records, Corey Wells, did Mamas and Papas. I remember going in the studio and having to work with George Martin and kind of freaking out, just kind of going, oh, don't suck, please don't screw up, you know. I mean, the cat sitting right there. But there's been quite a few, because there's also a real breadth from producers' standpoint. You can have producers that are incredible musicians that really know what's going on, but you have other producers that really don't know anything about music, but they're instinctive when it comes to songs and or a take. You know, you could be cutting all this stuff and they can sit there and not say a word all day, and then they kind of go, I think take two was the best one. And you go back and listen and you go, great. You know, so the ones I don't really like working with are the ones who feel they have to impose themselves on the date to justify being there, and they're not contributing anything. And on one of my basses, I have my producer switch. So if a guy tells me, he says, I want you to make it more shimmery, then make sure you can see me flip the switch on it, and then I play in a different position, and they usually go, yeah, it's great. And there's no wires or anything. It's a placebo. It's just a fake switch. And then you have those moments. There's those exceptional moments that happen, like when we would be out with Phil, every time we play In the Air Tonight, and it would the tension that would build up to the drums, the big drum fill in it, and you look out and you'd see, you know, it could be 80,000 people out there, and they're holding up their drumsticks to go da 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 da. I mean, you get goosebumps from it. It's really amazing. Or like when we'd be out with James and we'd be up in the Berkshires, and he'd be singing about the Berkshires, and as soon as the word Berkshires, or when we'd be doing Carolina and the Carolinas, people just go completely crazy. It's really fun when those moments happen. But I like the intensity of a complete show. I like just the way shows build and the power that happens during the course of it. And there are signature moments that are pretty exciting. Well, the one I generally turn down is I'm not a slap funk. I mean, I can bullshit that, but I don't do it well. I've never been good at that. And if I get calls for that, I usually recommend somebody else. I just go, no, call this guy. He eats that stuff for breakfast every day. He's great at it. I think the thing where I'm really the most fortunate is whatever my style is seems to fit all kinds of different styles of music. I don't really change anything I do. If I'm playing country or funk or jazz or you name it, sometimes it's a tonal thing, and I leave that up to the engineer. But for the most part, I seem to have found like a general sound and technique that seems to fit into almost everything. So I don't go from, like, if I'm doing a country date and I'm suddenly having to play a whole country bass, and then suddenly I'm doing a jazz date and I'm playing jazz bass. I'm playing bass and it seems to fit all these. So it doesn't really require that much adjustment from me. It's maybe more interpretive. So if I'm playing like a country thing and it's like a lot of big whole notes, a big country ballad or something, I'm good with just playing whole notes. And if I get called to do a fusion project, and it's all kinds of notey stuff, but I don't change my tone or my technique that much. I crafted a sound that's really fat, really rich, but still very clean. And I've learned over the years that when I do play, even though in my mind I'm playing kind of sloppy, it's precise to the point where it reads beautifully within a track. And I don't even question it. I just go in and say, let's count it off. And usually I can pretty much nail a song within one or two takes of it. My first gut response is usually, for me, the best ones before I start thinking. You know, as soon as I start thinking, it all goes to hell. Certainly one of the most poignant albums was probably Spektrum with Billy Cobham, because if I walk into a studio anywhere in the world and I start going do 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 do, Man, Stratus, guys jump all over that. It's like a hungry dog on a T-bone steak because everybody's jammed that in clubs and stuff like that. It was only a whole album took 2 days to make. It's basically like 1 or 2 takes of every song, but it took on a life of its own. And to this day, it's still one of the defining albums of the rock fusion, jazz fusion period. I mean, it's hard to imagine that we cut that in 1973, yet it still carries the importance that it does. Man, it was just balls to the wall rock and roll band, like rock blues band. I love playing that kind of music. It's just fun to play. So I think if I had to, if somebody said, you can only pick one thing, it would probably be in that genre, just because I enjoy it so much and it's such an audience connecting thing. People are just like, yeah, get out there.